So, you want to build an ultra match. A few things you have to know. First off, there are two ways to build a barrel assembly of an ultra match. There is the hammer tap method, which is that one, which has a lot of advantages and disadvantages, but unless you're going about 16K, you're not going to see much difference. And you have the ZDS method, or zero dead space. This is a Magnus plunger tube, by the way, but same rule applies for a normal plunger tube. But I don't have one of them apart right now, so I'm just going to show you the one I'm working on at the moment, which is the Magnus one. Advantage: this allows you to have no dead space. It allows the dart to rest right where the breech is, and it allows for it to be an assembly that you don't have to pop into 50 million pegs like this one does. With a ZDS barrel assembly, you can basically just unscrew the whole blaster. Okay, you can have it hang only on these two little pins on the front of a Fire Strike, or on your front bracket on either your Pink Crush or your Star Shot, and you basically can just pop the whole thing out either by keeping the barrel assembly in, or if you want to maintain where the plunger rod is, because sometimes those are a real pain to take apart, you can just slide the whole thing off and keep your whole plunger rod there, which is often what I do when I'm working on my blasters, unless I got to work on something on, of course, the plunger rod. Okay, the disadvantage is you now need 3 springs, not 2. Okay, so you need one to hold the whole thing in. You need an outer barrel for certain. You can't just go up without an outer barrel. And you need, because what you're doing is you're losing this part. So without this for it to hit every time you dry fire or fire hard, this is going to move on you. And it's going to either pop it out of the pegs eventually, or it's going to pop it out of your screws on your Pink Crush. So ZDS requires that you basically take the, okay, this is right here. This is your front or outer AR assembly, and then the little line here is the inner one. You take those two out, okay? You take this whole thing off, you remove the peg off the outer AR assembly, and you file the back of it entirely so that you can put a tube in there. And you either bend the tube like in here like this and then hammer it to the back, or you leave the back of it on and you put a piece of twine and you're putting the barrel in like so. How do you put the barrel in and glue it? You have to either use epoxy or urethane glue, and of course that always has a danger of popping out. If it does, you just take crazy glue and glue it back in and pop it back in, hammer it. It's not a big deal. But I use urethane glue because it bonds both to brass and plastic really nice. And you have to basically hammer the whole thing in, bind it to your plunger tube, and then boom, you have it. But this is more than a one-day job because you have to make sure that this is completely dry, it's working, you know. So epoxy is my favorite because it's a cure that is chemically, not with air, not with water, not with the moisture in the air, you know, like Gorilla Glue is. But it has much nicer performance at higher yields. But you have to have a spring in front of it, in front of this whole deal, okay, in order to do it. Okay, so number one thing is you might want to go lower yield in this to begin with. Now, how do you make a hammer tap barrel assembly? And I do have pictures. One, you take your barrel assembly off, you put it in a vise carefully, make sure, for example, that it's a rubber mount vise. Or you may want to just put a rod or something down here, like an end of a hammer down here. And then you take your brass and you hold this, you hammer it, and you have your whole barrel assembly in there until it either reaches the back tabs here, where the barrel closes up, and normally where your dart tightens, or you hammer it all the way back. Okay, then you file this off to your desired length, and then you put it on your AR housing, which I highly recommend that you take out the center AR housing and make a venturi, and then venturi the whole thing. But if not, just take out the AR. You could do it normally too, and it's a little less performance. And then you have, there you go. It has more dead space, but it is more solid in the front. And some people are kind of formed with the idea of, why is that spring loaded? You got to be losing some velocity. You got to be, no, I'm not. Not losing any. Because this is so freaking tight, it hardly moves. Okay? It also, the ZDS method allows you to move the plunger forward about between 3/8 and 1/2 of an inch. The nice thing about that is now you have more air and your plunger's all the way forward. But you do have to, but you do have to understand that your barrel is going to sort of have a mind of its own. It means you're going to have to sight it in. So now, how about barrel length? Well, let me give you an example of barrel length. I'm going to take off this barrel assembly just to show you. Okay, that is an 18K from here all the way here. That's your barrel assembly. You do notice it dives a little. That's because of the spring, and that's why the sights are compensated for that dive. So a lot of people think, yeah, you're angling your blaster up. Actually, I'm not angling my blaster up. I'm doing it to level to the barrel, which I had already sighted in indoor freaking range. So I know that it's going where I want it to go. So let's see. So watch this. Watch this. See? Aha. See? It's straight. It's perfectly straight. However, it's angled. Sure, the blaster's angled, but the bore is not. This is because the spring, because of how this is so, is going to angle. Your spring is going to bunch like so, downward. And it's going to angle your whole barrel downward. That's just the way it works. Now let's take apart. Okay, let's take this apart again. Okay, and let's use the bird of prey. As you notice, it's got a much bigger barrel. It's using the same plunger tube, but it's not using the same spring or plunger rod. It is 21 kilograms. It's using a black tactical version 2, but it's using an HPI red spring, which is your remote control car springs that HPI uses for the 1/8 scale cars. Okay, so same distance, as you see. Let's go from here to here. As you see, 21 kilograms takes a lot more barrel to better use the power. How is this determined? Why do I need a longer barrel for higher yields? Okay, imagine that because you are using more spring, this plunger's going to go faster. Your dart's going to go faster. To express the plunger to the dart, and put in mind the dart has barrel has a higher compression ratio than the plunger, this now means you need more of a distance of your barrel, so that when the plunger reaches the front, the dart is exiting the barrel, instead of either being in the middle of it too long, or being out of it by a few inches too short. When that happens, you're losing all this compressed air and power. So either way, and I mean you're talking by maybe a margin of 1/4 or 1/2 an inch with this size of a plunger, you got to be precise. The barrel on a 21K is about 6.5 inches. On a ultra match, it's about 5.5 on your 18K. So that is why they have to be different. In terms of your outer barrel, well, it all depends on how much you want to stabilize the dart. But put in mind, the longer your 9/16 is, it's going to slow down the dart. This one, I gave it a longer one because I wanted more stabilization. It's got a scope on it. Does it cost it about 5-10 feet? Yeah, it does. But it's more accurate. So when I put in my MHA domes on there, or MHA slugs, which I fired a few, it is dead balls on the scope. Now this one, for example, it's got a shorter one. It pretty much all it does is hold the spring, so that it doesn't go back when I fire or when I hit it. Okay. It's only 1/4 inch. It's not much. And this is because this is my quick draw weapon. Usually, if I'm shooting at something within 80, 70 feet, usually closer than that, because usually my back up and I just go, BAM! And I let somebody have it. That's why this one's shorter. Because it also expresses more power. It goes really, really far. If I had a longer barrel like this, it would lose a few feet. but it would have a more stable dart. So ultra match, that's what it means. It means you're using 9/16 to stabilize the dart. It also acts a little bit as a suppressor. It makes it sound a little effeminate. You don't have a big pop when you're firing, but it's more stable air. Next chapter. The difference between Star Shot, Fire Strike, and Pink Crush. If you're making an ultra match, although many people consider them all just Fire Strikes or even laughably Night Finders, which Night Finders have a lot of differences and a lot of things that you want to do different to make effectively great blasters. There are some advantages and disadvantages of all three blasters, and they all inherently have them. There is no great one blaster, although lately I've been gravitating more towards the Star Shot. Okay, Fire Strike. Advantage. Easy to find, everybody's got them. They're pretty good blasters, okay? They're easy to build, they're easy to make, and they look male, alright? Disadvantages. This right here. Splits. So if you have a scope on here, and you may actually want to scope one of these, you can get some pretty good distance on an ultra match. You have to take the scope off every damn time you fiddle with this. Okay? On a Pink Crush or a Star Shot, your scope mount or your accessory rail is integral. This means that this whole thing pops off with your scope and everything. You can keep your scope settings. However, you may actually have a little bit of tug here and there. You may want to check your sights, with I usually check them at 10 yards, 33 feet, okay, just to make sure. All right, so I'm usually firing this when I'm sighting it in. I'm firing it at 33 feet, which when I was shooting real firearms, other than rifles, when I was shooting pistols, I was sighting at 10 yards with my scopes. So let's see. Advantage of the Star Shot. Much stronger plunger rod. It uses this plastic, which is stronger for your springs. So this extends all the way up here, where your springs rest. And on top of that, it is ribbed between your trigger catch and between the spring rest. This comes completely out, so you can put your trigger catch in without trying to rest the spring. As where this one, you have to rest the spring while you're doing it, and it may pop out on you. And usually that trigger catch spring has to be one hot spring to work. Okay. Pink Crush. Advantages. It has a three-dimensional spring catch in not one, not two, not three, but four pieces that are U-shaped and then back reinforced. It means the fucker can probably take 25K. The other advantage is that it's made in quarters. You got left grip, right grip, top and top right, top right, top left. What that does is it makes it so you can have the whole thing assembled. You could take it out and you can work with it. But hey, how would the plunger rod would come out? Hold on a second. What? Weston, come in. I'm shooting a video. I'm explaining the Ultra Match system. How are you doing? Good. So the advantage of this, of course, is that you have a thing that you put in. So you're thinking, oh, well, the plunger rod can't. No, the plunger rod screws in. The whole thing screws in. It's really great. So you can have the whole thing in there. You've seen pictures, I'm sure a lot of you have seen pictures of my pistol, where the barrel, the plunger tube, and the plunger rod are just sitting there. This third grip can hold in the plunger rod. The plunger tube can be held in by the screws. It's really, really nice. All of these have advantages and disadvantages. A lot of people right now are using the Pink Crush to make ultra matches. And that's nice, but you usually have to take off this advantage, the first coil of your spring, because your spring catch is farther up than the Fire Strike or the Star Shot. You have to do it on both the springs, and the Swarm Fire spring is pretty heavy spring, 1.8 millimeters, and this means you'll probably have to file it before breaking it off. And I do recommend you do this beforehand. So, and then the Star Shot, finally. It's just stronger. It's a much more sturdier system. It's my favorite, and that's why it's my favorite one. And you don't have to cut off the springs. And when you put in your metal you put in your metal reinforcement plate, it fits right in there just like the Fire Strikes. But if you want to be all original, use one of these. So another really interesting thing between the three pistons is that there are two different types of plunger systems. Basically, one, you have your cross plunger system. But what it does is it is one solid piece. It has no hollow tubes on the inside of it, and it's a cross. The cross is molded into the shell. This makes it so this doesn't twist. And when you have a lot of pressure on your trigger catch and your spring, you really want this. And the reason is because this now doesn't twist at all. You don't have to reinforce it. You can leave your plunger rod pretty much alone with the exception of the binding of the plunger head, which is explained in Fire Strike Incentive 1 and 2, except with epoxy. So, if you've got Fire Strike, however, different story. It's a much softer material, and when you get it, it's bent like a freaking question mark. This means you have to A, straighten it out, if you really want to keep this intact, if you don't want to just reshell this, 5 times a year. And B, you have to fill the inside with epoxy, which does two things. Okay. Number one, it reinforces it. It makes it so it doesn't ever curve up, and that your trigger catch is right into there, and this doesn't bend or give at all. Number two, it makes it so you can adjust the right height of the actual plunger rod. For example, on my 18K, where it's reinforced back here, it's actually higher than the rest of the rod. It makes it so that this can be pretty much straight, and it makes it so that there's no way that there's any give when the trigger catch is engaged. It makes it so it has to hit that ratchet perfectly, and it makes it adjustable. If I wanted this to be higher against my trigger catch, I can just put more epoxy on it. And of course what I did is I filled this part with epoxy. I sanded it down to make it smooth, but I can make this bubble as big or as small as I want. I can make it higher or lower, and this is how you customize your trigger catch on your Fire Strike. The other thing though is you don't want this to be too high. If you make this too high, it will have more drag. The advantage of the Fire Strike system, in compared to the Pink Crush and the Star Shot, is you don't have that much drag. You only have this bottom surface, and if you lube it, epoxy it really nice, it's just going to glide right on top of here. The whole thing's going to have a tendency to push downward all the time. And so it's going to make it so it rises. On a Star Shot or Pink Crush, you don't have that advantage. So usually what you have to do is you have to lube this whole thing, either with lithium grease. I've used chapstick. I've used all sorts of stuff. On the Pink Crush I used chapstick because it was the same color, and it worked very well. Fortunately, I couldn't find this color chapstick, so this one I used lithium grease. But you have much control of the plunger rod. It's not going to twist. It's not going to bob. And look how straight that is. So straight. This is going to line up your O-rings better, your trigger catch better, everything. There is no give on this. It's another reason why a Star Shot and a Pink Crush can take more yield than a Fire Strike. No matter what, this is not going to be perfectly straight. But it does come in contact more with the shell. So that is another advantage and disadvantage of the Pink Crush, the Star Shot, and Fire Strike. Next section. Right height of the plunger. There is another difference between the Fire Strikes, Pink Crushes, and Star Shots. On a Fire Strike, your plunger is sitting high. If I grip it like this, I've got a good 3/4 of an inch before this would ever hit. Look at that. Before that would ever hit my hand. There is no danger of this hitting my hand. None at all. The whole plunger tube rides higher, and so does the plunger rod, which makes it so that it's higher up. It's also a little bit easier to engage because you got your fingers here, okay? And if I got my fingers here, now I do this a lot like an M16 AR-15. This is why I have this cut down. Because I don't like this big protruding handle. It's not really that attractive on a Fire Strike. You see? My fingers always would hit my hand if that was any higher. Okay? On a Star Shot, they are made for smaller hands. Put in mind, Star Shot, Pink Crush, what are they made for? Little women. And because they're made for little women, they're made for little hands. Because they're little hands, they didn't give you as much clearance. Very little. If my thumb is up here instead of down here, it will hit this every time I fire. So when I fire this, I have to go down like that. I really hate that. And also, I like the plunger rod assembly on this. It goes well with the rest of the blaster. Since I'm going for this, Luger Walther P38 sort of look with this, I chopped this off. To me, it looked much better. But if you get a Pink Crush or a Star Shot, put in mind, this is going to be low, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's inherent in the design itself. Now, one thing you can do is you can hold it lower like that, but who wants to do that? The better thing to do is to hold the thumb like this, and if you go cross thumb with it, put the thumb behind the wrist, or right on the wrist, the wrist detent right there. So if you're holding double-handed, and I do recommend if you're scoping to hold it double-handed, you want to do that. If you have it way up here like that, look at that. That's gonna just slap right into your thumb. The Pink Crush has the same issue, has the same problem, and do put in mind these weren't meant to have power plants that rival beam and air guns. Okay, just didn't intend to have that. And finally, the biggest advantage and disadvantage of Star Shots, Pink Crushes, and Fire Strikes: ammo capacity. Now, you may not think it's that big a deal, since, of course, you usually have your Stephens in a big section of your cargo pants or whatever, but sometimes it does come in handy. A Fire Strike only has 2. And put in mind, they are fixed length. Look at these. You cannot throw Stephens in there. Usually when I'm running around with this, they're empty. I mean, sometimes in a war, even if I'm using Stephens, I'll throw a couple of deletes in there just for shits and giggles. These were originally designed for wars with delete darts. Well, delete darts were allowed, so yeah, I usually had them in there anyway. And you never know; could come in handy. Not too nice, snug fit, brand new or close to brand new elite darts. I would do that. On a Star Shot or a Pink Crush, you have these bows. Now, put in mind, a lot of people with the Pink Crush, and maybe even a lot of people with the Star Shots, won't use this. If that's so, you have no ammo storage whatsoever. But if you do use them, they're a huge asset. I can hold 6 darts right up here. And I mean, even with your MHA foam, everything, and put them head in right there. And just grab one, throw them in. Another advantage the Star Shot has, other than the other two, is it has this light. The light is a different size than the one they use in the Fire Strike. The Fire Strike one's real big. As you can see, usually they're open. Why do I have all this open? Open, open, open. Oh, on the first R spec, this was open. This is tradition. Because before I glued these in, these were always popping out on me. Hence, another reason why I don't use CPVC is the fear that that's just going to pop out on me. And if I do that, I have nothing to hold the plunger tube in other than the 2 pegs, which of course I want a better system. And the fact that I just like brass better. It's a better tube size and everything. That's my opinion. Yeah, that's my opinion. Most of the Nick uses CPVC, but I'm not a trendy. So, at anywho, enough of that. I just liked it better. What I noticed was not only can I keep an eye on this, you're sort of showing how it's built, and it looks kind of cool, but it also lets in more air into my plunger rod assembly. So that, you got to remember, when you're pushing air this way, you're also pulling air that way. It's got to come from somewhere. I never use a light on these. I mean, I have fixed sights. I don't need the lights, okay? So I don't have the light in there. Now, on a commission, usually I have the light in there. Sometimes I even supply batteries for the light. But on my personal ones, I don't like them. So, and you're like, well, why don't you just chop all this off and all that? Because then they'd have this big empty space there, and I wouldn't have this bottom bracket to line this up. Because remember, this is only hanging on like 2 points and one down here. If you open this right up, the whole barrel assembly will come right out. So, on a Pink Crush, you do not have a light assembly at all. And if you hate lights, hey, that's great, that's fine, it's dandy. It's also shorter, it's smaller, it's a lot more nicer, and it fits in a standard airsoft holster. So, I bored this out, like so I can fit a Sharpie marker in there. And I happen to find this one that's the same color as that. It's really nice because you're not reaching around your pocket trying to grab a marker. If you're in the middle of battle, hold on a second. Just a second. You can put boom, 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 boom. Look at that. I could fit any length dart in there. Those could be slugs. Those could be number 6 washer slugs. Those could be any type of stuffing dart you want. Those could be elites. You can have anything in there. Right there, you have it. But here's the cool thing, right? Instead of reaching into my pocket, looking for a pen, looking for a pen, looking for a pen, doing that, I can just very simply, grab off here, grab off here, grab off here. Simple. That's pretty fast. Most people don't understand that the system is a relatively fast system of loading and reloading. If you have it right here, you always know where your pen is. You always know where your ramrod is. Just like on a Civil War rifle, they always put it in front of the barrel. Well, it's the same here. You can do that with the Star Shot. It's a nice system. And then if your rounds are right there, you don't have to reach in your pocket and grab it. And it's not an air gun. You don't have to pump it 8 or 10 times. This is why I like an Ultramatch system so much. I had a Panther. Actually, I still have a large take Panther that I have not even modified at all. These just, I don't know, they're more convenient. They just are to me. But the thing is that you're also taking those 8 or 10 pumps of cocking effort on Panther, and you're throwing it to one big, huge pull. Do any of them have an advantage or disadvantage over pull? In spring, no, not really. Your pull is going to be too slow for any more or less drag between plunger designs to really do anything different. So the big thing with an Ultramatch, if I were to, okay, the big thing with an Ultramatch, what I would decide if I was going to make one, is one, am I good with brass? Good with brass to the point where I'm not just taking the front end to cheat and not crowning the barrel or anything. Because if you don't crown the front barrel, deburr it, you will lose performance. I mean, I've tried just straight out, just your normal brass barrel that comes from K&S, and it's nicely machined. But it was the difference between doing with an elite dart 120 feet and 130 feet. Because then I took the same blaster, I took out the front of it, I deburred it. It did 130 feet. This was a commission, 16 kilogram commission. It did 130 feet simply by deburring the front barrel. It's that simple. I mean, your transition between 9/16 and 17/32, right? So unless you are willing to tinker around, I wouldn't make an Ultramatch. Number one. Number two. Do you have big arms? Do you have to eat spinach to have big arms? Or just do you have big arms? If you have big arms, long pull, and you can easily do this all day, if you're used to shooting a crossbow, if you're used to shooting a 50-pound compound bow, okay, yeah, go for it. Okay, you work at a construction site all day, and you're a framer, or you're a drywaller, or you're somebody who deals with heavy stuff. Yeah, okay, go ahead and build one. Alright, next, do you understand the philosophy of dual springs rather than one spring and a long draw? Do you understand the philosophy that you have to seal the air really well because all of a sudden you're making it a big pulse of air rather than one long sustained blast of air? The difference between a lot of blasters that people make in the neck, which are like Panthers, snap pulls, and rainbow bows, is the philosophy is different. It is a long sustained acceleration of air, which uses usually a bigger plunger tube and a longer spring, so that it slowly gets up to power. An Ultramatch is different. An Ultramatch is an instantaneous blast of air. which means your barrel is going to be shorter, your draw is going to be harder, and your travel is going to be shorter. This is what is used to enable on an ultra match. This is what makes them powerful, is that you have two springs with two torque curves flying at the same time. That is what does it. Are you willing, if you are into the philosophy of one spring, are you willing to change it for this one, or you just want to stick with the philosophy? Now, put in mind, both philosophies work, okay? And there is a third philosophy, there's airgun philosophy, that you have a pre-charged amount of air that is accelerating the dart really slowly, and out, where you have an unlimited amount of air, potentially. You may want to stick to those two. If you really believe very strongly, well, I'd rather stick to that philosophy, then go for it. They work. They work. They're proven to work. People have built an entire community on that. They work. The other thing is, you better make sure that the spring plate is reinforced. I use a 3/4, what they call it a pipe cap. It's not one of those screw-on pipe caps. It's actually, if you have a metal chair, and you know in school you have those little pop tabs that keep it from being a piece of metal sticking out, and put these little safety caps on there. That's what these are. They fit a 7/8 spring. If you put out all the tabs straight, they fit a 7/8 spring perfectly. They fit a 9/16 spring perfectly inside. Then all you have to do is either cut a U out, or make it solid. Solid's better all the way around. Put it in your plunger tube and glue the plunger head with epoxy. One last thing, if you want to think about making a ultra match, are you good with epoxy? Very important that this has absolutely no air leaks whatsoever. All your bindings of all your parts of your barrel assemblies, these are all glued solidly. They're glued with epoxy, the whole thing. There is no leakage, okay? There's no way it can. Not only are they glued, but the surfaces inside are also sanded with 220 to make sure that the epoxy sticks really well. The plunger head too, you pop off the 3 insides, right, and you pull it off. Well, what I do is I put a hole through it for this way, okay, so that the actual end of the plunger will take in epoxy. And I put the plunger head back, I snap it back on with my springs, my spring plate, my trigger catch, everything in there. And then I put Teflon tape around the outside, and then I fill it with 2-part epoxy all the way to the top, and then I put a piece of wax paper on top. So that's flat, but then after that I hit it with a flat file, and then I sand the front so it's perfectly smooth. So that the entire plunger head is just filled with epoxy. It can never come loose. You want to wait a day for it to set, because even when it sets 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever says your cure time is, you really need to wait a day for all of the monomers to release from the chemicals and for it to be what it should be. It should be hard. Doing that method, I have not lost a plunger tube yet. And I've done a ton of these, either in reshells or in commissions or my own. So don't worry about haters. I've hearing a lot of people just make a big deal out of the haters. Dude, they're just people with opinions. They've always been sort of opinions against me for simple reasons. When I came in with that retaliator, I came in a little too hard, a little too high. You know what I mean? And I was a little defensive. And I went out and I did a range test, and it wasn't good enough. And I was just like, screw these guys. You know, they're just going to continue to ask me for stuff. Oh, do this, do that, do that. Because no matter what, they're going to hate the retaliator. Well, you have to understand that these people have worked, as we all do, on our own projects, for hours, days, and years on their designs. And when they find something that they don't like, or they find something that is, well, makes theirs look not as good, even though theirs has certain advantages, like the use of a hopper, being able to make it out of PVC, and being more commonly built and easier to build, they will still look at my design and say, well, you know, there's no way. It's a stock plunger tube design. Yeah, you know, there's no way you can get that kind of speed out of that plunger tube. yeah, there is another factor to air pressure, and that is force, folks. If you have a certain amount of plunger and you have more force, it's going to create more pressure. It's going to make it go farther. Also, a lot of these designs that I see where people complain. I was looking at one, and I'm not going to say who. I don't think it's fair for me to. Okay. I was looking at the plunger head of a rainbow bow. Okay. And it was clear. One, I noticed a few things. One, it was not really all that looped. If I had a rainbow bow with, let's say, arbitrary 7 inches of travel by arbitrarily 1.5 inches in diameter, and that wasn't the diameter, by the way, I'm just putting up an arbitrary number, because I don't want this person to feel insulted by me, okay? There was no lubrication, and the reason there was no lubrication, or they were using an inferior lube other than olive oil, which eventually olive oil dries and sticks, or a silicone spray, which you have to lube all the time, but it didn't look that way. The O-ring didn't look like it was lubed at all. Had no lube. If I were to make a bow like that, that part would be painted, so I could use as much freaking lithium grease as I wanted. And the parts that were internal, let's say your catch and where the spring is where it bunches, I'd make that clear, just so I can see that. Number 2, they're using single spring, but that doesn't really matter compared to number 3 and number 4. Number 3, the O-ring looked to be about a 1/4 inch thick. It was a big-ass O-ring. But when you have a big-ass O-ring, you got a big-ass amount of draw. You have all that surface area hitting your plunger. Hitting your plunger tube. Well, when you do that, you're slowing it down, especially if it's not lubed very well. And number 4, the biggest one, that plunger head had to weigh a 1/4 pound. It was polycarb, okay, and it was, the plunger tube was one solid piece, then it was screwed in with a metal bolt, okay, which slows it down even more, okay, and then, a metal bolt. I would use nylon, simply because it's lighter, and, oh my gosh, it was just crazy. Can easily just take a nylon washer, a pipe, put a hole through it, make that middle fixture out of either a blank that is 1 1/4, okay, and then drill through it and put in your thing, and then put in that same washer, nylon, and then you put an O-ring, but you use an O-ring that's no bigger than 1/8 of an inch wide, okay. If I had to stack another O-ring on top of it inside, I would, and then put another one, Teflon tape, and put in another one. I'm betting you this thing weighed a 1/4 pound. I'm betting you if you were to change that out, you would get something that instead of weighing like a 1/4 pound, and it looks impressive. It's some guy either milled it or CNC'd it out of a solid piece of polycarb. That's impressive, but it weighs a ton. Polycarbonate was not made to be light. Okay, nylon was made to be light and strong. You know what I mean? Polycarb is heavy. Okay, in terms of composites usage, is heavy. Okay. I'm betting this thing would probably weigh somewhere in the vicinity of 30 grams, 35 grams, tops, which goes into the rod. Now, the rod was a piece of ABS. It was notched out. It looked nice. It looked like the same ABS solid ABS that Venom uses on his Venom kits. It looked nice. The binding to it looked nice. The whole construction of this thing was brilliant. It was beautiful. But you got to remember, there's such a thing called power to weight ratio. Put a 427 in a Pontiac GTO that weighs 4,000 pounds. Now, anybody ever heard of a 428 Cobra? Carroll Shelby, AC Cobra. Car weighs about 2,200 pounds. And they put a 428 nose, and it was doing 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds, as where the GTO was doing it in 5.1. No, 5.1 was the 454, sorry. 5.4 was the 427, okay? And it wasn't a tri-power anymore. It was the Stromberg carburetors. This was in 69. And the Cobra, the last one was in 67. Oh, I got a better one for you. How about the time that the same guy, Carroll Shelby, made a GT40, and he put a 460 Ford in it. And he claimed when he put it in there, he revved it up, he fired it up, it was even too short for him to even fit in there. It was really little. And he said, ah, ha, 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 Ferrari's ass is mine. Well, that was the year that the GT40s that Carroll Shelby made were first, second, and third at Le Mans. kicking Ferrari's ass, Jaguar's ass, Peugeot's ass, Renault's ass, every goddamn car company's ass, and put the Americans on top. It was beautiful. Ferrari came back with a vengeance next year, though, but that year they were king. So, anywho, power rate ratio. Remember, it really does matter. Just like it does with your darts, the heavier the darts, the more power it needs to go. But it also grabs onto the air better. It better uses your plunger, which is why I use longer barrels instead of heavier darts to produce more speed. Like I said, I'm just different philosophy. I mean, don't be upset at the haters. They just have a different system of doing things. I sure don't get upset at the haters. I don't stay mad at them. I think some of their arguments are ridiculous, but some of them, I mean, I know Bob's come up with quite a few good points. You know, quite a few. And one of which was, why not put a level on it? Yeah, I can understand that, but like from this blaster, for example, I can put a level back here. Right. Okay. I don't really need the sights, that's true. Except my problem is leveling it to that and putting it like so. So what am I supposed to do like that? Okay, and then fire it. I could do that. Sure. But what I usually do, because I'm doing it in a place with lines, is that's one reason I picked that one place. And the other reason is that the squares are perfectly 20 feet. So I don't have to put out a tape measure and piss people off, because I have pissed people off with long tape rulers. It's part of life of living in suburbia. Is I make sure that the barrel and the lines are parallel. Now put in mind, if the lines are straight and they look like they're going uphill because the camera's uphill, the blaster will too. But look at the line between the barrel and that, and you'll see that sometimes I have some that are low and some that are a little high. But I'll tell you this, with that wall of air, 2 degrees, 3 degrees does not buy you range with something that shoots as fast as these. Now, 5 degrees, 10 degrees, yeah. But 5 degrees is like that, okay? I'm not firing it like that, okay? Or 10 degrees is like that, okay? I mean, unless somebody's like pointing it straight up, I mean, really, it's not going to buy you. And even when I did 30 degrees with this, it did 208 feet. You know, but obviously, somebody's pointing it like that, you're going to know, okay? You can't really buy that much range. And my big thing is, on range tests, no matter what, people are going to bitch. They're going to bitch. That's just the way it is. If you're indoors in a parking structure with a ceiling height minimum of, I think, 8'4", okay, there's no way you can arch a shot, okay? But they're going to bitch, oh, well, darts bounce, and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so then you go outside the grass. Oh, well, you could have arched. You get a level. Oh, well, you know, we didn't get to see the level. We don't know. So then you put a cameraman on the level. Oh, well, you know, you put a cameraman on the yellow. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Oh, get a chronograph. Oh, you used really light darts instead of heavy ones. You know, it can go on and on and on. If somebody just simply doesn't like what you're doing, they don't. And they are entitled to their own opinion, as every free, loving American is. I say even Australians, I say even Singapore, I say even Malaysia, I see anyone that I have a fan, you have a right to your own opinion. If you don't want to build it, you don't want to buy it, that's fine by me. Stick to what you do. If it works for you in war, stick to what you do. These work for me in war, so I'm sticking to this. So anywho, toodles, take care.